Welcome back. It's Stove Talk with Matt. A Russian stove is a type of masonry heater. Each country does a little bit different. My favorite is the Russian stove. The Germans do a little bit different than the Swiss and the Dutch, etc. If you are ever interested in building a Russian stove, this website is an absolute gold mine. It's put forth with free plans and free drawings by Igor Kuznetsov, who's like a legend in the Russian stove business, who has the roots and ties to what the Russians have been doing for hundreds of years. It's simply stove.ru, www.stove.ru. Sometimes browsers won't take you right there. I don't know why. Sometimes you might have to do the https / without the www, stove.ru, or just put it into Google with maybe Igor Kuznetsov. You'll eventually find it. Sometimes it doesn't come right up. So this is the site here. You translate to English. It translates well to English. Then you go here, drawings for free. Click this, and then you see all the different types of stoves where he's providing free plans and free blueprints, basically, if you want to build your own or have whatever contractor you're working with build this. Now, this video is going to be pretty highly technical, looking at the plans and helping you interpret the plans. It took me, a few months to know every bit about what's going on here. It's hard to interpret at first. It's going to be highly technical, and this is not going to be for most people, this stove video. It's really for somebody that eventually wants to build one of these. So you would want, or 99% of the people listening to me would want OIC. It's OIK. Once you hit translate, it's OIC. Heating stoves by Igor Kuznetsov. OVIK is heating and cooking. Some people might be interested in that. The others are boilers with water flowing, highly technical, extremely hard to build. Even some of the OICs are very, very difficult. So most people will be interested in this, so we'll just spend our time here. Click on OIC. Then you get the plans for OIC 1 through OIC 22. So in terms of understanding how the plans work and the blueprints, I know OIC 14 is the easiest to understand. A very simple stove where the way the Russians lay out the stove plans, they'll tell you exactly what the base of the stove looks like with exactly how you should lay out the bricks. Then they'll show you level 2, exactly what bricks you should put on top of level 1, level 3, 4, etc., all the way up here to level 31. This is without a doubt the easiest stove. It's kind of hard to interpret and see this. This stove will, this is your firebox door here. This door at the bottom is called the blower door, where the air comes in and comes up through a grate into the firebox. It's also ash clean out. And I'll show you how that works regarding the plans. Here, you just basically follow the door. This turns it on its side and has an X-ray view through the stove. Here, the door's in the front. Basically, what happens in this stove is the wood goes in here. Here's the grate. Almost all Russian stoves have a grate where you lay your wood, and air comes up from underneath through the grate. Almost never with these stoves or the Russian stove do they place wood directly on bricks. It's an iron grate. The wood, most of these also are called double bells. So the bottom section is separated from the top section with a small corridor where the smoke, of course, can escape through into the second corridor. And these stoves are famous for winding the gases up and down and around before it lets them out the chimney to hold the heat in. If there's, say, 300 bricks in this stove, I have no idea what there is. Some larger Russian stoves have 500-600 bricks. The idea is it takes an hour to warm up those 500 bricks, but once they warm up and hold heat, you have basically 500 heaters that radiate heat back into the house for 8 to 10 to 12 hours. So in this stove, the firebox is here, the smoke and flames go up. There's a corridor here in the back. The gases here wind up and then down and then out. Well, it would be the opposite. They would go up here, be pushed down, up and out. This is the simplest of the Russian stoves. So let's use the simplest one for me to show you how these plans would work. So where is level 1 here? This is your base. Oh, before we start, these plans from Kuznetsov, most do not require fire brick. Some do, and where the fire brick is recommended, it shows you in the plans. I'll point that out to you. But they don't need fire brick. Of course, you're only going to get maybe 10 years out of a stove like this if you burn it a lot without the fire brick. I get the idea the impression some of these bricks in Russia are of a higher quality, and you can go longer with your stove without the fire brick. Also, you want to use pavers in the United States if you don't want to make hundreds of cuts. Most of these stoves do not need a lot of cuts if you use pavers. The reason for using pavers is they match up. Two running this way across width, or it equals 1 in terms of height. So a paver would be 8 inches, 2 across here, 4 inches, 4 inches. They exactly line up. A regular brick, it's called basket weaving. A regular brick, if you lay 2 next to each other and place one on top, a regular brick, this one on top will be off by a 1/4 inch or more. This is a nightmare in building these sorts of stoves, unless you have an incredibly good wet saw and you can make 150 cuts, and that's not a big deal. I always try to do the descriptions here for the amateur or the people that are not experts. So level 1 here, this is your base. It's simply 8 bricks. If you're using just a fire brick is 9 inches long, and fire brick in the United States do basket weave perfectly. 2 laying this way is exactly 1 this way. If you can build this, fire brick may be like $2 a brick or something like that. I forget what they are. If you can use all fire brick for this stove, you should. If not, use pavers, a good clay paver or shale. We'll talk about bricks some other time. And make sure they match up. It's very, very important. So here's your base. It's simply 8 bricks. Level 2 will show you exactly how to lay your bricks on top of level 1. These are 2 small bricks here. Your first little door, again, is always going to be your clean out door. Where there's a gap here in the plans at level 3, that doesn't mean there's a gap or a hole in the stove. It just, the door then continues to come up. This is showing you how to lay bricks. Almost always when there's a gap or a hole, it's telling you there's going to be a door there, a clean out door, the door for the, it's called a blower door below the firebox, or the firebox door itself. Level 4, you stack that right on top of level 3. Then this is the grate. At level 5, you'd be laying the grate, of which you would, with an angle grinder, you'd carve out a shelf around the edge of your bricks and lay in. Actually, these real narrow bricks here. They could be fire brick. They could be. I'd have to take a closer look at that. I'm sorry, but the grate goes in here at level 5, where the wood goes on top. And then it's showing you that there's a door, of course, being put in at this level, the door that would be open to put the wood in. Levels 7, 8 here, it's all open because it's assuming the door continues to go up. Then smaller fire bricks on top. I'm not sure exactly why these... I've seen people build this stove just with bricks across. There is flexibility here. Just putting regular brick around the door. I'm not sure why Kuznetsov has these slivers, which appear to be like fire brick. Anyway, sorry. Level 10, 11, 12. See, you're just continuing to build your box. Most Russian stoves have a pretty high firebox. A higher firebox allows the flames to lap up, and flames lapping up mix with the smoke and burn up the smoke, and so you don't have a ton of smoke coming out the chimney. If you have a little tiny firebox, it's not giving the flames enough time to lap up and burn up the smoke. All of these Russian stoves, there's no secondary air or anything like that. There's going to be a little bit of smoke. But once they heat up and all the bricks get hot, I don't think there will be that much smoke if you build one of these, especially if you allow a high firebox like most of these call for. So at level 17, this is where you, in most of these stoves, it's called creating the ceiling, or the you could say the barrier between the first bell and the second bell. So at level 17, it's bricks all the way across, except for basically a sliver here. I would interpret that as 1 full brick long and a half brick wide. When in doubt, of course, err on the side of letting a little bit more smoke and flame flow through. I've seen, there's wiggle room here. I've seen people make this stove with just a full brick open here, which allows the flame and the smoke and the hot gases to pass from the firebox or bell 1 into bell 2. So here we're at level 18. You continue. I'm not sure why this is so, I mean, Mr. Kuznetsov knows more than I do, but this gets real tight here. This is like a sliver opening. Again, when in doubt, obviously let the flame and the smoke and the gases come through freely into the second bell. This gets, I don't know why it's so skinny or tight here. So it's very hard to interpret or for me to describe what's going on. I know exactly what's going on in this stove. I can't tell you if you haven't seen this before. I just will let you know that if you continue to follow this design exactly as it's laid out, it will take, we'll go back down here. It will allow this is the one brick, that opening that allows the gases and the smoke and the flame here. This is the grate where you put your wood, allows the gases to come up here, get kind of trapped in this first bell, but then wind down the bottom, of which there'll be a small opening, and then the gases will be allowed to come up and escape into the chimney and outside the house. This is always a damper that opens and closes. If you don't have, these Russians have their own dampers that they sell in Russia. I've never seen one sold in the United States. You could use just any piece of metal that you could slide in and out of the bricks using an angle grinder to create enough space so you could slide your damper in and out. This is very important, but I'm not sure I'll talk about it in this video. So this here, 17, separates the first bell from the second. Continue to just build it exactly per the level that it gives, exactly as it's laid out. And as you're building it, you can see kind of what the idea is here. At 22 boxes it off. This once it boxes it off, this will be the outlet for the chimney. So gases are drawn up basically at this side of the stove. They're trapped. They do hit a ceiling. This will be, see, this is the ceiling on this side of the stove. At 29 is the ceiling, only allowing one little half brick to let the gases out. So they're allowed to come all the way up on this side of the stove. They are intentionally trapped and blocked. So then they're eventually forced down and up this square here at the top right. This is a common design in Russian stoves to essentially trap heat. And they know, obviously, exactly what they're doing. Now, for all these stoves, any stove where you trap heat, you have to have a good long chimney. You can't just run a little pipe out the window and have 8 feet up. You'll smoke your whole house out. There has to be a good 12, 15 foot, hopefully insulated chimney or double wall chimney. If you're not insulating it, it should go up in the house as long as possible. If it's not being insulated, it should push, 15 to 18 to 20 feet, especially if it's going outside into the cold air and then straight up. Absolutely need a good chimney system, and a chimney system where you can preheat the chimney. I will talk about that, but I don't know if I'll get to it in this video. Need to preheat the chimney, or these things will not draw. You'll light them and you'll smoke your entire house out. Again, my goal here is, I don't want this to go 2 hours or something, just to help you interpret the plans. We'll talk about the need to put in bypasses and warming the stove up and warming the chimney up and why that's necessary some other time. So this looks like down here just another option if you wanted to go. I'm not sure what this option offers, but let's look at another design. Again, I'm doing this on the fly. I'm not sure how much of that made sense. I apologize. Let's go OIC 4. Is a gigantic monster of a Russian stove. So to see what we'd be building here, where there's just an open square, these would be where you'd put in your clean out doors. Some people that don't have the money to buy doors would just put in a brick or two with just sand and clay, where that brick could be carved out once a year, where you could get a shop vac or a vacuum in there. You can use bricks as the clean out doors if you mark the spot and you don't use any mortar. just sand and clay, so you could easily dig those bricks out. Your firebox door with the Russian stoves, the blower door or the clean out door is always underneath. These two doors are always right next to each other, basically with the grate in between. So this door is opened up, the air flows in this bottom door. This door, of course, after the wood is loaded, remains closed, and the air comes up through the iron grate. When I made mine, I didn't, there was no iron grate that fit my circumstances, so I simply bought rebar, any sort of steel bar. You could just cut it with a Zoll saw or a reciprocating saw with a steel blade. You can make your own grate, not just notching out the bricks pretty easily. If you make your own grate, always allow air on the side of allowing airflow. If you have wood that drops down, big deal. The grate where it's too close together is useless. Airflow is everything. So in this stove, which is the best picture to show you what's happening here. This is almost impossible for anybody looking at this for the first time to decipher. I know exactly what's going on. I've been looking at these stoves for I don't know how long, forever. So here, the firebox, let me show you what's going to happen on this stove, and then we'll look at the plans. High firebox, gases are drawn up. Gases will be drawn off to the left and down. Gases will be drawn off to the right, down. There'll be a ceiling across here, right under these cleanout doors, separating this first bell or burn area from the second bell. Basically, the Russian stoves, it's a box sitting on top of a box, separated. Any box has a floor, and a bottom box has a ceiling. So when it's a box on top of a box, there's only one area where the gases are allowed to flow into the second box. And they're typically wound all over the place in the second box, more than they are in the first box. So wood goes in here, this door opens up, air comes in, flames, smoke, etc. shoot up, hit the ceiling, are pushed down along this way, pushed down to the left and right, where there's two channels on each side here. They'll get down the first channel on the left, slip underneath two bricks, go up. I'll take back what I said. There's two ways for the gases and smoke to get into the top box or top bell. Gases come up, hit a ceiling, they're drawn down to the right, go down a channel, under two bricks, the opening, up a channel. So when you look at the plans here, you can, whenever you have these two boxes like this at level 10, this is your lifting channel where the gases will come up. Everything here is ceilinged off. At level 15 here is the ceiling between the top box and the bottom box, and these two squares, and this is the giveaway, I call the separation between bells, allows the gases to come up into the second box. So again, here's your base. Make sure your bricks two across line up to one high exactly, not a quarter inch off. You'll be making hundreds and hundreds of cuts. And I have to put my cat down. Sorry. Okay. Level 2 will tell you exactly how to place your bricks on top of level 1. Again, where there's openings, it's assumed there's going to be a clean out door, either brick or a little iron clean out door, metal clean out door. Of course, there's no opening in the stove itself, or all the smoke would pour out into your house. So same with here. This type of stove is so massive, it has lots of clean out doors. Of course, that when it's inside the stove here, there's no clean out door. This is all the interior. This just will allow gases. This would be your firebox here. Gases to flow up. They would come down here, and then they would come back up at this part of the stove. Again, firebox here. This opening here at level 3 is for what we call the blower door or the clean out door for the ashes. Level 2 shows you at what level to start putting in your blower door or ash door. Level 5 here shows you, it's pretty easy to see, this is where you would insert your grate. Your wood, of course, goes on top of your grate. Your gases are going to flow up high, and then eventually they're going to go down these two channels on the right and up the smaller channel. With the Russian stoves, the down channels are usually larger than the up channels where smoke and gases go up. The lifting channels are smaller. Smaller lifting channels actually move faster and increase draw and draft. This one, if you have patience, I mean, it is pretty easy to build. If you don't know what you're doing, it's going to take months of laying brick. But the plans are easy, they really are. And if you these bricks kind of there's not too many cuts. Of course, the lifting channels here. There's a half brick, of course, but that's just cutting a regular paver down the middle with a cheap wet saw. I always like using a wet saw. Any cheap tile wet saw will work. Just have to make sure you buy a little bit more expensive blade. Of course, you can get a better wet saw, but there's no teeth on these wet saw. It's just kind of it's smooth. You think, well, how could they cut a brick? But it does. It's pretty darn hard to cut pavers compared to fire brick. But building this whole stove in fire brick would be extremely expensive. Kuznetsov, with his plans here, is not expecting people to use fire brick to build this stove. He's expecting people to use regular brick. I'll try to talk about that at the end as to how things that can be done so the regular brick holds up. So again, you don't really even know, you don't have to know what you're doing. Just lay level 7 on top of level 6 exactly as it says here. If there's a gap here in the front, this is just placing a full brick on top of a half brick. Now it would leave a gap underneath and a little bit of gaps on the end. It's too complicated as to why these stoves have these gaps in the Russian dry slit or dry slot. We'll talk about that some other time. Again, look at the plans very carefully. At level 8, use a magnifying glass if you have to. That's a gap. I mean, that is, what is that? Well, it doesn't, so you can interpret that the way you want. I would interpret that if I had to build this stove, I would interpret that as, say, an inch or so. But you make sure you look at, don't just assume that this is drawn wrong and, this brick is supposed to touch this brick. No, you look at it very, very closely. This gap is here for a reason. It's part of the dry slot or Russian dry slit, and we'll talk about that some other time in another video. Here, level 9, there's a little gap. I'd interpret that as about an inch or even 3/4 of an inch. It's part of the Russian dry slot. Is it the end of the world? Probably if you touch these bricks, no. But you want to follow this. This guy knows what he's doing. His grandfather and his grandfather before that made Russian stoves in the 1800s, probably. So this one more than most, even though it's a monster. It is just simply laying brick on top. And in terms of mortar, a lot of traditionalists in Russia and around the world just use 3 parts sand, masonry sand, not coarse sand, to 1 part fire clay. Unfortunately, fire clay now is expensive because everybody has to have their fire clay sinks in their new Toll Brothers homes. The fire clay is like $40 a bag, or like 15 years ago it was probably like $8 a bag. So 3 parts sand to 1 part clay. I don't like that because there's no real mortar there. There's nothing holding anything. It'll hold. I mean, it will hold. But if let's say you're not an expert, you wanted to move quickly, it doesn't really set up for. It never fully sets up because there's no adhesion to 3 parts sand, 1 part clay. But if you knock it the next day, it's not going to move. And the more bricks you put in, the more everything just gels together. I don't like that. I like adding, say, a half part lime. The hydrated lime we get in the U.S. is the worst lime, but a half part lime and maybe just little less than a half part of type N or type S mortar. So basically, I add a little cement to the 3 part sand and 1 part fire clay. 3 sand, 1 fire clay, 1/2 lime, hydrated lime, the stuff you get at Home Depot and Lowe's, the cheap stuff, and then just maybe a half to a quarter of cement, type N or type S. Just within a half hour, it just firms everything up. So you feel more comfortable working a little bit more quickly. If just that little amount of cement, it'll hold up to the heat. It's still 90% sand and clay. That's my opinion. Others may disagree. Level 15 is your first, your bottom box. This would be the ceiling on the bottom box or the ceiling on the bottom bell. that the gases is allowed to flow into the top box, of course, through these squares, which would just be 1/2 brick on each side. Calling for the exact same thing for level 16. This he knows more than me, no doubt, but this would not be absolutely necessary. Not sure why this is doubled up. You're going to need, well, I'm not sure. The way these bricks are stacked, all these bricks might comfortably rest on these other bricks to hold everything up without angle irons or without lintels. I don't think this stove would require lintels or angle irons. These bricks are placed strategically, so these are columns that will hold up this ceiling. To me, this could absolutely be skipped. But the more mass you put in these stoves, I mean, the more heat it's going to hold. So, of course, this is a giveaway as to where the gases are allowed to come from box 1 into box 2, level 17. Now, this is your damper. This represents a metal plate that can be bought in Russia and Europe. I've never seen it sold in the United States. You'd have to basically just make a piece of sheet metal. 22 gauge or better. I mean, if it's galvanized, make sure you burn it off in a burn barrel and you burn that zinc off because it's poisonous. And you'd have to be pretty crafty with an angle iron to make sure it's tight. So these what do you call it? These dampers, I mean, they're closed off when the stove's hot and everything's working properly. But there will be a damper that allows a bypass, because when this stove is cold, you can't just light it and have the gases and smoke flow down and then up. You'll smoke your whole house out. It simply won't draw. This will have, I guarantee, will have a bypass of some kind where you put your wood here in the firebox, the gases will go straight up, be allowed to go straight up into the second bell. There's another damper here and out through the chimney. So at the very minimum, the damper being open here, these dampers being open or closed. Sorry, I have to go back. I'm a little disoriented, but there'll be a damper here that allows on startup everything to go up the chimney, which warms a section of the stove. A warm stove creates draw and draft, and you're also heating up your 10 or 15 or 20 feet of chimney. So when you close it off and then close the damper, now forcing the gases down and up this way, forcing the gas, it's hot enough by having everything being burned with these dampers open, maybe for the first 20 minutes until everything gets hot. It's hot enough where now the chimney's going to draw the gases, and they're going to allow the gases to go down and up and then wind around in the second bell. So let's see. Okay, guys, I had to pause. This stove has no damper. Now, I don't really know what to tell you about this, but this doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe, again, there's a way, there's an assumed way potentially in Russia of warming the rest of the chimney by, sometimes I've seen where they put fire starters in the chimney itself to warm it up. Maybe there's other ways of warming the chimney, but I assure you, and I'll tell you, how to deal with this. I assure you, if everything is ice cold here, and it's 20 degrees outside, and your bricks are ice cold, and your chimney's ice cold, you light this thing up, I assure you, if you try to force gases to go down, all the way down to the bottom and then up these lifting channels, you're going to smoke your house out. It's going to absolutely pour out the door, which is not airtight, and pour out the ash door, the blower door. Maybe, again, I don't live in Russia. Maybe Kuznetsov, maybe there's a way of warming the rest of the chimney up, and it might be assumed. If you don't have that, you have to be able to warm the chimney up when you light these cold. Now, it's not a huge deal, because you have to understand, once they get warm, they draft, and these stoves are burned over a 4 or 5 month period continuously, so that they're never allowed to go cold. If you see what I'm saying, if you get everything moving, everything stays moving. They're burnt twice a day, in the coldest parts of Russia for 5 or 6 or sometimes 7 months in a row. So the draft never goes away once you get it going initially. That might be the thought process. Or why put in all this damper and all this stuff for one light up? It's only going to be a problem one time in 7 months. You're never going to let this thing go out if you live in Russia. Just feed it twice a day. It's not supposed to be fed all the time. But if you're doing this in the U.S. and you're not going to keep it running like they do in Siberia for 6 months straight, twice a day, you would need, again, this is your Firebox. Your grate here, gases go straight up. You would need to put a damper in, a sliding piece of metal right here. You need to let the gases go right up through this ceiling into this second bell, or you're going to smoke your house out. Unless you find a way, I've seen people warm their pipe up with like a little small stove. They'll have a little tiny small stove that can feed hot gases into the chimney, into 20-foot chimney for 20 minutes. Then that would be fine. Then this would just work. But, that's probably why it's not here, because the mindset here is these people they keep it hot all the time. So it's only an issue at startup once a year. See what I'm saying? If you're not going to use it like that, you'd absolutely, and whenever they're not kind of used the way they were used in the old days in Siberia. When the Russian stove makers and the thousands of videos I've watched where they build these things, they put the dampers in because, some of the more affluent customers they're building these things for in Russia, they're not lighting them twice a day for 6 months straight. They have a lot of cold starts. So you need to let there be just basically another hole here in the bricks, the ceiling, where the metal would slide in and out. Slide the metal out, gases can flow up through the stove and out, warm everything up. After 20 minutes, once everything gets warm, you'd slide the metal back in, which would then force the gases off to the left and to the right. One last time, I don't see any way it's possible that this will not smoke your entire house out on a cold start without the damper. Okay? I would not do it under any circumstance. I've done it. I've seen a lot less smoke houses out. Okay, enough said. So, this is the ceiling between the bottom box and the top box. If I was building it, I wouldn't put layer 16 in. And then you can see, once you get to the top box, you want to find out, okay, where's the chimney that's going to exit the stove and then have the chimney go up outside the house. So the chimney exit here is in the center of the stove. There's just one way out, and there's another damper on top here, a metal piece that can be slid in and out. That's what this represents. But in this case, because there's no damper between bell 1 and bell 2, that's so once the fire stops and you just get coals and there's no more carbon monoxide that's going to get in your house, no more smoke, you close the top damper, which blocks the cold from the outside air from coming down the pipe, getting into the stove, and cooling the stove down. It's not just essential to keep the stove warm so it drafts properly in the morning. A warm stove is going to just start right back up, and the draft will continue. You want to keep it, obviously, the cold pipe, with the cold air coming down the pipe will hit this metal damper that's then blocking the cold pipe from the stove, and the stove stays warm, and the house stays warm. So, again, these are your lifting channels here, left and right, and he's going to wind the gases around a bit using these levels here through level 28, up and down to a degree, holding the hot gases in the stove as long as possible until eventually they'll dip underneath here and be allowed to come up through basically there's one brick. It's one brick. Will be the chimney width and height is just one brick here, and that's, I don't know if that made sense or not, guys. I tried my best. As you can see, this is a little complicated. So let's just go through these quickly, and I'll wrap this video up. They all work this way. Let's see what OIC 1 is a nice. It's OIC 14 is the easiest one. This is also is very manageable. And again, the final lifting channel here is just half a brick. That's okay, as long as you're not, again, 4x8 paver, so it would be 4 inches. Anything less than that, or like a that's too tight. Regular brick in the U.S. is not 4x8. It's a little smaller. It's a little too tight. You could probably get away with this. A Russian brick here is larger. Sometimes they're using a stove, a fire brick in the U.S. is 9 inches. In Russia, they sometimes use 10-inch bricks. So this little square here is not as small as it seems. Be very careful. You're trying to attempt this with regular tiny little bricks. Won't be enough room for the firebox. Won't be enough room for the gases to escape. So that's one. Let's see what 2 looks like. Well, I should show you what the stove looks like down at the bottom. Let's see, there's your firebox door, your blower door. Let's see how this one would work. It would be, yeah, gases drawn up, down, up into the top bell, underneath this 3 brick divider, and then up out the chimney that way. Is putting in some fire brick here. Not much. And here, the fire brick in Russia looks like to be the same size as the other brick he's using. That's not the case in the United States. But fire brick is easy to cut. It's much softer if you need to make cuts in fire brick. If you have the money, you can build. The best thing would be to build all these stoves with just fire brick in the United States. It basket weaves. It's 4.5, 4.5, 2.5. So, 4.5. 4.5 by 9 by 2.5. So 4.5 plus 2 is 9. It does basket weave and it does line up with itself perfectly. You can afford it. Use all fire brick, but you don't need to. And that's not what he's expecting you to do with these designs. So 2 is a pretty simple design. Let's see, 6 is the bench stove. This is the gases are the firebox. The gases. Here's the stove door and the blower door. Gases are drawn up and hit the ceiling. They're drawn down, and they wind along a bench before going into another bell, of which they're drawn up and down and up. I mean, I'm just telling you, when these bricks are ice cold, you absolutely need the damper, the way to warm everything up. It will not. There's no way you get fire and flame and gas to go up, down through a bench, up here, up through another bell, down underneath here and up. There's no way it draws if everything's cold without the ability to warm the whole system up with dampers or a way to warm the chimney. And I have to look. I don't know if this one has a damper. It looks like it does here. See that damper here probably allows direct access out. Let's see. Where's the dampers? I don't know. It's hard for me to even look at these quickly and try to make that determination, but it does. I mean, that would be a damper there. Here, see? There's a damper here that can be slid. The metal can slide in and out. That allows. I mean, that's absolutely necessary for a bench stove. You got to warm everything up. Then you slide the damper shut, closing the metal off, which forces the gas then through the bench. But you cannot force gases through the bench if everything's cold. You'll absolutely smoke your entire house out. I hope I've been clear on how important that is, or if that even makes sense. Please understand that concept. There's nothing more important in these stoves if you're not burning them every day for 5 months in a row and you don't live in Siberia. So, some of these other designs, they can get complicated here with on this website, it does show what denotes fire brick. The one, this is more of like a denoting fire brick firebox where the lines are like closer together. But a lot of these stoves don't have any fire brick, just using regular brick. And I guess I should talk about that to close. See, also in the plans down here, the yellow denotes the fire brick. And it's just yellow brick for the fire box where it gets up to 1,000 degrees. Then just using regular brick for the rest of the stove. So what was I going to talk about to close? Using all regular brick. Brick is fired to 1,800 degrees to 2,000 degrees. A paver that's let's say, shale or clay. It's fired to almost 2,000 degrees. It can take the heat. What it doesn't like is rapid heat up and rapid cool down. In some of the tests, I used to stack bricks outside for months in the cold, and just a few of my pavers cracked. 98% were fine, and I'm just taking it immediately to 900 degrees, and outside it's 25 degrees, and then it's getting cold and hot, and they held up. But if you're using regular brick, it doesn't like heat up fast, cool down fast. That will cause a crack. It will hold up to the heat itself for 10 and 15 years. So if you're using just regular brick, the rule is always heat it up slowly. Or, if you're going to get a cold snap for a month, fire it up, with just some twigs and a few logs and some wood that doesn't burn real hot, and get everything warm slowly. And then, maybe it'll hold a bit of its heat, and the next morning then you can fire it up. You don't want to, like a cold house at 50 some degrees, and then you just load regular brick with 4 or 5 pieces of oak or hickory hardwood, and you take it up to 1,100 degrees inside of 5 minutes. Red brick doesn't like that, and it'll crack. And you don't want to build one of these monsters. There's no way to get in and fix it. You can repair the firebox, but that's about it. So, just take the heat up slowly and take it down slowly. And, again, the Russians only burn these twice a day because they hold their heat for 8, 10, or 12 hours. So when they're going to light, and they don't overfire them, they'll put in just 3 or 4 logs in the morning, and then 3 or 4 logs at 8 o'clock at night. Doesn't get ridiculous. It's just the bricks, it's never real hot to the touch. You can always put your hand on all parts of these stoves on the outside. They're so massive, they're just kept kind of lukewarm. But there's enough mass where it just radiates out and keeps the home warm for all winter long. That's the concept. Don't want raging, ridiculous high temperatures like you get in a rocket stove or anything like that. And anyway, let me try to show you where this is the drawings for free section. What would be the there's a key for all of this that I should try to find for you if you're going to try to build these. Is it for your information? Sorry, it might take a minute or so. I'll try to cut it out. No, let's just say not in home. What would it be? For your information? No, I was just about there. Articles, I think that's what it is. To help people who make our stoves, I think this is the key. It was articles and then the first link, to help people who make our stoves. And it's probably at the bottom of this, if I remember correctly. Down, here we go. The key, and the English is on the right here. Laid flat, laid on the side. Fire brick yellow, regular brick red denotes fire brick where there's more lines versus less lines for the red. And then there's a lot of key here you'll never need, like when you're putting in an oven, a boiler, hot water, all these systems that, there's your damper. Much of this you're not going to need if you just stick to the heating stoves. So this will help you as well. So hopefully that was helpful to get you started. And I built one of these, and, you just take your time, and if you take your time and you're patient, it's fun and it's easy. It's very difficult, but it's very manageable if you take your time. Say, this is going to take a month. That's okay. We need to do 1 layer a day. If you're not an expert, you try to do too much, then you get into real problems. And always make sure everything's perfect. Check your level. Check your level again. If you don't like a certain cut, make it again. If you're not an expert or a bricklayer or a mason, assume it's going to take a month to build this. And that doesn't even include getting all the materials. So, is there anything else? Well, we'll do more videos on this. That's good for now, just interpreting the plans.